Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Good evening, yes.
Good evening. Just getting set up. All right. So hopefully everyone's having a good day. Hopefully you guys were able to get around to setting this up. I know some of you guys have. We're having some difficulties. Hopefully you overcame that. But I did see some people able to get it running. So good job on that. Now, where did we leave off last? We were working on this registration feature file, and we did all this together. And what did we need to do next? We needed to click the checkbox and click the sign up button, I believe. Did anybody have a chance or was able to figure out what needed to be done? I will take that silence as a no. All right, well, lucky for us, we will finish this up today as a class. So let me open up Wolfstork. Register page. And we needed to click this HIPAA policy checkbox. And once we have that, we can click the sign up button, right? All right, so let's check this out. Here is our second checkbox. Here's our first. And what did we use to locate this? I click on element, so we use the class name in order to interact with that element, all right? So WN, let's just copy this. See if everything makes sense still. And yes, still looking good, makes sense. Now, what about this next one? Now, this is using the same class name as the first one. So knowing that when we interact with it, it changes, right? We can see. So, right, WS checkbox false, WS checkbox active. So this is going to change. And we may or may not be able to reuse this same locator, because after we click this first one,
I'm sorry, Robert, we can, if
We
you just
can do
copy
it.
paste, it's gonna put two checks box.
Beautiful. All right, let's try it out then. Oops, wrong button. User clicks, was it HIPAA checkbox, right? No. Yeah. HIPAA checkbox. Save this. So it sounds like you were able to figure this out. Who was that? Was that Ivan?
Yeah, it was kind of just trying and see what's gonna happen. Me and Konstantin, we worked together about it.
Cool, cool. Did you were you able to click the sign up button too?
No, because we couldn't figure out what locator or what class should we use for that.
Okay, we'll figure it out now. So yeah, both of them got checked. Everything passed. That looks good. So then the other one's going to be the checkbox, or the sign up button. So let's make this. And we're right here. So let's see. Looking at this, there are a couple different ways we can try to interact with this. So the first thing we can do is what happens if we use of type button. So let's do first button, or rather, button. Oh no, wait, I'm going about this the wrong way. Yeah, I still forget syntax sometimes. Type equals, all right, so we're getting something right now, because once I put this type, we did get a match. And because what am I doing, right? I'm searching for an element that has this tag button and has an attribute of type, right? So this has it, and 3 other elements do as well. These other buttons as expected. So if we were to use this as is, would it work? It would work most likely because it's going to interact with the first element that's returned. And in this case, the first element is going to be the sign up button, which is what we want. Now, if you guys remember, I said that when we use locators, we want to make sure that there's only one matching element that's returned.
Yeah, but this is the good practice to do that?
No, this is not the good. We don't want to do this, right? I'm just, just talking through it.
What is the correct way?
Well, we're gonna get to that. Don't worry. One second. Yeah. So, right, we want to just have one element that's returned to us. So, will it work? Let's just try this out. Click sign up button when I click on element, and I still don't have my auto-populate working, don't know why. So pass in the locator, right? I'm just gonna add this pause here. Let's get rid of this pause. Save this and see what happens.
Robert, I sent in chat a unique locator for this button, but
All right.
it's just problem is too long name, but it's work.
And how'd you get this?
I use some extensions for Chrome.
Okay. So let's see, step when I click element, button type is not defined. You can store this. So why? Let's see, when I click on element. So this did not work. It did not like this. All right. So another way we can go, well, first let's try out your locator. Okay. See if this works. Interesting. So I didn't even see the second one get clicked, but it says it did. And here we see it still failed. I'm trying to click this. Let me just do this. Just add this weight back so we can see what's going on.
Robert, I sent you another locator. Try this because
Sweet.
I in my code it's working.
All right, we'll try yours next. All right, so now we saw both buttons did get clicked. Same thing again, right? So let's try. So this isn't working. Let's try this other one that just came in. All right, yes. And if anybody else has any other locators that they came up with, just send it my way and we'll try that. See, still not working. And you said this was working for you?
Yesterday.
Oh, no, I see what it is. The step.
It's work.
It's my step is wrong. That's why. That's why I wish I had my auto complete working. When I click on the element, that's what it is.
Whatever write that comment, it's not unique identifier because right now it's gonna be the first button it's gonna click, but it's not specified sign up button.
Ah, it did work.
Can we specify maybe 2 locator for one time?
Say like use 2 different locators?
No, for one step we can use 2 locators. Like I don't know, maybe class like this and first child button, for example.
So those are ways to, all right, so there's many different ways we can go ahead and try interacting with this. And it looks like both of these locators are going to be valid. So even the first one that you sent over, Nikolay, I think it was just because, yeah, it's because my step was wrong. I was missing the, so that's why it wasn't working. But even if we tried this long one right now.
Yeah, because in my case it's working, it's unicum locator.
And it should be working right now too. I just had an issue with that step syntax. And see, yeah, it worked. Now, all right, cool. Now, like I said, right, it's working because it's the first element that's returned. But if we wanted the second button to be clicked for sign up with Facebook, it's not going to work because this first sign up button is going to be returned to us. So another way we can go about this is to search for this text using XPath. Now, I know in some of the assignments or references that were sent to you for this sprint, it tells you a little bit more about how to use relative XPaths and some of the functions that can be used within XPath. So I have a little presentation prepared for the next meetup event that we have in 2 weeks, which is all around locators. So I'm actually gonna share that with you guys just after this, so you can kind of get a little bit more insights into it and kind of distinguish between CSS selectors versus XPath. So what we can do is use this XPath, and the way in order to basically show that something is an XPath, or to indicate that something's an XPath, we start off with these 2 slashes, // and then now is when we can go ahead and input the tag name. So in this case, this element has a tag of type button, right? So I can do this. All right, great. So I have that match. Obviously, we still have 1 of 5 returned to us. So we want to go ahead and filter this a bit more. So we have that specific one that's returned to us. Now, we want to use this bracket to indicate that, hey, now we want to basically call a method and do something more to it. So go ahead, put that bracket, and now I can go ahead and type contains, and I want to use this method contains to search for something specifically that the element is going to contain. And this is really powerful because this allows us to search for specific text on the page. When we're using CSS locators, you're not, they're very powerful as well, but you're not able to search for text on a page using those CSS locators. And you're also not able to have conditionals, all right? And when I say conditionals, that means and or. So an element contains this and this, or element contains this or this, all right? So as long as one or both conditions are satisfied, we should be able to find a match. So that's one distinction between XPath and CSS locators. So right now, let's continue with this, right? Contains, and we want to search for this text. So in here, we can put this sign up and bracket. And so all I'm saying is, hey, I want to find an element that has a tag of button and that contains text, specifically the text of sign up in this case. And looking at this, we have a 1 of 1 match, right? And so if I just went ahead and got rid of this, I could do sign up with Facebook. Why do we not want to work for Facebook? Let's see, sign up with. Maybe it has to be all caps. Let's see. No, it's the same thing I have here. Sign up. Oh, I see. No, it's not. That's why. So, sign up with. I have Facebook. There we go. Right. So now I can use the same type of locator and just update the text that we're looking for. And now I can use sign up with Facebook. And the same thing is going to apply for sign up with Google, right? So it's very powerful. It's fairly simple. And this is a way that we can look for elements based off of text on a page. So I'm just going to get rid of this and copy this. So why are we getting 2 back? That's why. So this is case sensitive when you're putting in the text. So even though something appears all caps, like we see here with sign up and sign up with Facebook, if you just go into the element itself, you can see what exactly the text is that's expected. And then let's go ahead and update our test. And I'm going to update this email. Save and rerun it. And look at that. We were able to successfully register a brand new user using this feature file. Questions?
Right now, XPath.
I'm sorry?
What What method did we use right now to identify this specific locator? It's a CSS or it's a different type?
This is referred to as an XPath. Now, there's different kinds of XPaths, right? So as I said before, XPaths are bad if you're using an absolute XPath. So for instance, right, if I right click this and do copy this XPath, I get this, right? Which looks very different than what we have here. And so the big difference between the two is that this is dependent on the current page structure. So if anything was to be moved, if anything was to be changed, this is no longer going to be valid, right? And it's very likely that something like that can change easily because we can go ahead and change a label within a container. We can maybe reorganize things a bit. And these sign up fields are still going to remain because that's just a part of the registration process. But that absolute XPath that we just copied right now will be broken in that case. So when you go ahead and use relative XPaths, which is what we used here, when we use these relative XPaths and you utilize these functions that are built in to XML, you can start having very powerful locators and have something that's also very reliable and robust. So when we use this kind of XPath relative, fantastic, right? And when we use this kind of relative or this kind of XPath that is absolute, very problematic, very fragile, it's gonna break.
Robert, can you change two checkboxes, change XPath on unique locator?
Do you want me to change something?
Yes, is it possible?
Yeah, you could change anything because this HTML, this CSS that we see is just residing within your current browser. So once I start double clicking something here, I can just get rid of this. All right, and now I updated the class that that's associated to. And so in this case, it may or may not look any differently. Let's remove this class and we see that change a little bit.
No,
but
I mean change it in our test.
Yeah, we could. What would we want to change it to?
To some unique locator.
Oh, okay, let's work on that. So how did we do this? Well, that's right, we're relying on this class because we know that false changes when it's clicked. Let's look at these two, styled, styled, false, styled wrapper, minus QQ. So these are using the exact same classes for both. Actually, well, we have.
Can we use text?
So not exactly, right? Because it's two different things. So if we were to look for the text, right, which is going to be this is not the checkbox. We want to interact with this checkbox, not this text.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying, right? So it's very closely associated, but there is a difference between the element that you're going to interact with. Let's see, the best way to go about this, I'm trying to think. So if I did that and I do this, classes. Just playing around with this to see how I can drill down. So here, right, I'm using the class name that's associated to it here. And then by me putting this div, I say that the next element that comes after that matching class is what I'm looking for. And so that's how, but we have 3, right? Because we have these other 3 divs that fall within this. So it's not exactly unique still, but we're making a little bit of progress. Another way we can do this.
Can we take some particular element of one class? First, second, or third?
Can we take a particular element of a class? So like a partial match?
Yes.
There is a way to do partial matches. But even if we did a partial match, right? Because the classes that are used are exactly the same, with the exception of this class right here, right? And this is a different class. And so that's what I started using. So even if I did a partial match for, say, this will match with this one over here, 7D2P-2. So the classes are exactly the same. So that partial match isn't going to help us. So like, trying to think the best way to do this. You got me right now. Got me thinking.
If something like right click and copy selector, maybe it will be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that, right? But I know it's not going to be pretty.
I mean, selector, not XPath.
I see someone has been playing with extensions. So like to satisfy our needs of a unique element, will this work? Yes, it definitely will work. Is this something that we want to use? Not exactly. One of the things about when we write these locators too is ideally we want it to be readable. So like when we look at any of these locators, we can see like we're looking for this attribute of placeholder with the matching value of password, right? And all of these other ones are readable, right? You can look at it, you can read it, and you can understand what it's looking for. If I was, and then even when it comes to this, right? Using this kind of XPath, I know that, okay, so we're looking for a button that it contains this text. All right, makes sense. When I look at this, all right, I have no idea what's really going on in here. So that's also something you always want to keep in mind, is that we do want to have unique or not just unique locators, but readable locators. Let's see. So basically, to really get back to the original question, can we get a different or unique locator for these? We can. It's going to take a little bit of work to play around with this and figure it out. And if anything, maybe I'll play with it and send it to you guys. But for right now, let me pivot because I do want to show you that slideshow I mentioned, which just goes over these locators with some better examples. Right, and so one of the things here is sometimes why are locators difficult to or why is locating elements difficult at times? And a lot of times it kind of falls down to the way everything was designed, the way it was coded. Developers don't always assign IDs or those attribute values that we saw, right? That placeholder value of password and the value. Sometimes things are dynamically generated. So in this case, when it comes to WoStork, none of this is dynamically generated. But think about when you see a report online, or if you look at, say, your like your bank statement, depending what you're using, it might show you it in like a report that you can interact with. And that's a web application. And there may be instances where you want to automate that. But those values are going to be different every time, right? And so in cases like that, those are going to be dynamically generated on the fly, different every time. So you can't find an easy locator like we do with these attributes. So we got to be smart with it to understand how can we go ahead and create a locator that is going to be robust, resilient, and not fragile, won't break on us easily. So those, and then of course, when it comes to like these more modern web applications, as we all see, even when it comes to Wostork and Facebook or any of those kinds of sites, there's a lot of transition. There's a lot of effects going on, right? It's a very pretty site. It's a very interactive site. And those sites can also be problematic when it comes to automating things. And that's how come frameworks are very important when it comes to automation. And so all we're doing right now with this is we have a very basic framework at our disposal, and we get to use these pre-existing steps in order to create these scenarios that we want to test for. However, in a environment where you have an automation framework that's built out and is going to be expansive, there is going to be a lot more logic to this. And that's when you're going to be doing a lot more coding, and you're going to be creating all sorts of custom methods in order to really eliminate any reuse in code, and in order to get the type of reporting results that you're looking for. So, we've talked about some of the ways we can locate these elements, and we started off with these CSS selectors, right? And so if we see that something has a class name, that's one way we can interact with it. And of course here, a lot of times you're going to see a class name that's reused many times over. Do I have it in here? Yes, I do. So it's not always a bad thing to get a multiple results returned to you, depending how you're interacting with it. All right. So in our case, we're reusing this step, we're using this locator, and it needs to be a one-to-one match. All right. In other cases, when you have that more built out framework, you can go ahead and have all these matching result sets returned to you and do something more with it. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, and again, right, whenever we're searching for class, we're using this dot, right? Dot flex item in this case, dot chunk. Next, we have another CSS selector. If something has an ID assigned to it, such as this, right? We see this header has an attribute of ID and a value of global nav. And in this case, we can use this hashtag and use global nav. And in this case, we have one result returned to us. Great. Right? And just a different example, but utilizing the same type of search technique, which is a hashtag upload button submit, ID of hashtag upload button dash submit, right? Searching by attribute. And so all of these should be familiar because we've gone through these. We're using some of these, especially when it comes to this attribute. These are the same as these placeholder attributes and values that we see here. So ARIA label equals open menu. Where are we? ARIA label equals open menu. Great. Same thing here. Data swarm button equals reset. Data swarm button equals reset. And remember how I was saying about there are ways to do a partial match, right? So in this case, we are using this label. And when you use this little squiggly, I forgot the name of this. Does anybody know the name of this? A little squiggly line. But using the squiggly and equal sign, that indicates that we are looking for a partial match. So anything that contains the word password is valid. Please return me those results. And here we can see confirm password is a match for us. So this is how you can locate a partial match. Now, we've already used these first three together as a class. This one we have not used, right? But same concept, just throw that little squiggly sign in there and you can find the partial match. Those are just 4 of many different ways to locate elements. And so if we go here, open, if it lets me. we go here, w3schools.com. There's a wealth of information on this site. You guys may already be familiar with this. I would hope so, if you've been looking into some of the stuff from our earlier sessions. And this is going to tell you all the different selectors that you can use. Very powerful stuff, really informative. And this is the type of, this is the skill you really want to work on and refine, all right? All in all, right, doing this and getting some more stuff automated here, it's great. And I know that when you guys are doing it and you're successful, it's exciting, right? It's cool to see that working. However, this is not something that you're gonna be able to just reuse and repurpose in your first job, all right? Because like I said, there's a lot more logic that's involved in order to use this in an actual development environment, all right? This is great for learning purposes and for you guys to get the general concepts, all right? But the main skill that you want to get out of all of this is to understand how to locate elements, all right? So if for whatever reason you could not get this working, you tried your best and it just would not work, that's fine. Don't stress it, all right? Just use the console and practice with these different types of locators. And whether it's you're looking for, a first child of a certain element, you're looking for, say, elements that are of type required. So like when you sign up on certain registration forms, right? Like ours, for instance, we usually have that little asterisk indicating that this is a required field. So maybe we want only those required fields. This is a way to go about that. Say we want something that has the hovering ability. And so all that means is like same thing right here, right? I hover over an element and something happens. In this case, it changes colors, right? And so these are all different types of locators you can use. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't really used a lot of these, say below this active one. I've used maybe one or two of them here and there when I was like in a really tough spot to interact with an element. But these are the ones that you really need to understand and how to use. These are going to be the more common ones that will resolve your issues. These are just a huge plus. If you can understand these or memorize these, fantastic. But I mean, there's no real need to memorize this because the information is going to be here available to you. All right, but I just want to show you there's many different ways to locate an element. So that's going to be our CSS selectors. Now, one thing is CSS selectors or XPaths, all right? Years ago, there was a big debate or stances taken in terms of CSS versus XPaths. And at one point, CSS selectors were much faster than XPaths. And that was still mainly in one browser, specifically Internet Explorer. Nowadays, things have come a long way since then. The architecture has improved a lot. Selenium has improved a lot. We no longer even support Internet Explorer, right? Because Microsoft no longer supports that. They use Edge, right? So Edge, Chrome, Firefox, all these more modern browsers have made improvements to them that basically make CSS selectors or XPaths virtually the same response time, the same speed to locate an element, all right? In some cases, CSS selectors might be beating XPaths, but it's negligible. You're talking about fractions of a second. So that's how come when you're dealing with more complex elements to locate, XPaths, in my opinion, and a lot of other experts' opinions, that XPaths are going to be a preferable way to interact with elements simply because of all the additional functions that are built into XPaths, such as the contains, right? Such as the and or, and I'll show you some more examples of that. And here, right, some benefits of XPath. XPath is a language developed for working with XML documents. As such, it allows for more powerful constructs than CSS. And all that means is just as anything, right? Whether it's a PowerPoint or an Excel file or a Word document, right? These are all just different file types that we see, right? At the end of a file, we see .ppt or .doc, right? Or whatever .pdf, whatever type of file you're working with is just a file type, right? And so XML is just another file type that is used in programming a bit because it's easy to transfer that information, but we're not going to get too into that. Just know when we talk about XML, it's just a different file type, all right? And this file type allows us to do more because it has those functions built into it. Another benefit of XPath is that you can navigate in every direction, all right? So we can find a certain element by, say, locating a class or a certain attribute, and we need to go up a couple levels, right, to some of those child elements from before, or we need to go down a bit more, right? It allows us that flexibility that CSS selectors do not allow us, right? In CSS selectors, we can only keep going down. We can't go up. Another would be, as I mentioned before, those conditionals, right? So I can use the and or, but on top of that, we can have nested or embedded conditionals. So not only can I have one statement that I want to validate as true or false, but I can have another statement then after that to validate something else in greater detail. And then XPath allows searching based on a node's value, its text, as we just saw, right? So using this is all that means. We can search for a specific text on the page, which in my experience, that is so helpful, all right? It can, some of these locators can be very difficult, and to be able to find something via text that simplifies things. Chances are things on the page are going to change over time, but certain buttons or functions on the page are going to remain the same. So it should last a good while. And if for whatever reason that that button has been renamed or something like that, you can easily just update this text here from sign up to whatever else it is, and that's all the work you need to do. You don't need to do too much rework. So again, right, this is what we just saw. So this is searching by text. And there's two ways to go about this, right? This is one way to go about this, and we went about it another way here, right? And so in this case, actually, no, it's the same thing. Instead of button, I can just get rid of that and put that asterisk. And when you see that asterisk, all that means is a wildcard. So as opposed to looking for an element with that specific tag of button, just any element on the page that contains this text is what I want. And that may or may not work in some cases. You might have multiple matches returned, you might not. In our case, it's still going to be just one matching item that's returned. In here we also have this text and these parentheses, right? And so what I did here is just this dot and comma. So this, when you see that dot, that just represents text. It's one of those things. Is it intuitive? Is it very easy to read like this? Probably not, no. I could definitely just go ahead and do this text and it'll help make it a bit more readable. But yeah, just something to keep in mind, right? So as I mentioned before about these conditionals, right? So we have this element here that contains, or rather this locator here, we're using XPath, using this asterisk, right? So any element that contains this class of title component, and we see here, right, this element contains title component and contains works, or at contents equals works. And we have this other attribute of content equals works, right? And so this is a way that I was able to have two conditions to validate or to search for the element that I want. And then we go down to this next one. Now we're using the or, right? So this is the exact same one as here. Now we're just using or. And as opposed to 1 of 1, now we have a 1 of 5, all right? Because there are probably, I'm going to assume, because I can't see the rest of this this code, but or HTML, but I'm going to assume that this is going to be the only one that has content of works, and there most likely is going to be many other elements on this page that has a class of title component, because classes again are reused multiple times throughout the application in order to standardize the look and feel, or have that centralized rather, right? If I know if all the elements or all the text on the page is going to be a certain format, I can use a class so I don't have to deal with each and every section of the page. I can just use one class and it takes care of everything. So down the road, if I want to change something, I can just go to one page or one section within the code and update that, as opposed to touching every single section within the page, because that's a lot of work. And then this is something that is a complex locator. And so here we have starts with, and so we're looking for a class that starts with page. And so this is something that, even if we were using it on the example from before, those classes were still the same for these locators, right? So this checkbox, exact same, right? So like I said, you got to play around with it a little bit more to figure out a good way to make them distinctive. But I'll play around with it and send you guys a locator after this. All right, but again, just really powerful stuff here. Starts with @class page, boom. Now in this case, I have multiple that are returned to me, right? But that might be good depending what my intent is. And then here, this is a really complex one. And this is actually, I created this locator myself for a prior assignment I did. This had to be the most complex locator I ever wrote. And it took me a long time to figure out how to do this or write this specific one. And it was just because that page, it was designed in a certain, rather, let me put it like this, right? So I could have gone about it and think about, there was 5 buttons that I wanted. And I could have gone and put a locator for each one of those buttons, right? So this locator for button 1, this locator for button 2, button 3, so forth, right? I could have done that. Now, the issue with that was, what if the text within the button changes? Or what if things are rearranged? So they're basically, I didn't want to have to deal with each button individually. I wanted to get a collection or a list of those buttons returned to me. And doing it like this, now I can have something that is a bit more rugged. It won't be as flaky. It won't break as easy. And I can also, get that whole list and validate other things I want. I can validate all the buttons at once. I don't have to worry if they introduce new buttons, so new forms within those. So instead of 5 buttons, there's 6 or 7 buttons. I can still use this locator, and as long as it resides within that same section, I can get everything back that exists there, even if things are added or removed over time. So I went ahead and did this because this was the best solution for what I was trying to do at the time. Like I said, this took me quite a while to figure out. I remember I was like almost pulling out my hair because it was very frustrating. But this would be a complex function, all right? Now, these, again, are just some ways to interact with elements using these XPaths, and there are many other ways as well, which we have not gone through. And I'll just open this up real quick. And so we go down here, and this is going to give you a lot more information about XPaths. And I'll talk about the absolute XPath versus relative XPath. All right, types of different locators on the page. Let me just scroll down a little bit more. We're at the or and that we just went through. Start with function, and it's showing you some other good examples of real world scenarios where you might need to use these types of locators. And yeah, we just keep going through, and there's going to be a bunch of other different stuff. So following a certain element that comes after, an ancestor, child. And so all of this, right, we're interacting with elements without writing any code. We're just understanding the syntax of XPaths or CSS selectors, and that allows us to get the elements we want. And so being that nobody knows how to do any coding yet, or knows just a little bit, you gotta first tackle that beast before you can like really merge these two skill sets. But if you're trying to develop that a little bit more, you focus on the locating aspect of it, because no matter what language you're going to be working in, C#, Python, Java, whatever, right? If you get into automation, the locating the elements are still going to be the same, regardless of the language that you're working within. Now, one of the best practices is called dry. Don't repeat yourself. All right. And so remember, I was saying that in some cases we might want all of those matching elements returned to us, even though we don't have that one-on-one. And so here's just a little code snippet of a situation or a scenario where we have a method that exists that we can reuse over and over and over again to find specific elements. And so I can just basically call this method right here, this get element, and I can just pass in the text that I'm looking for, right? And so this looks familiar, right? Text contains label, right? And so this is just the visible text that we're looking for. And this one's using that the following function as well. And it's looking for an element following a certain type. So don't get too wrapped up in this element type, but we're just saying here following, say, button or radio button or checkbox, all right? And as we saw before, when we looked at those checkboxes, sometimes it can be very hard to interact with a checkbox or a radio button. So we can go ahead and search for this text, and using that following function, we can then grab this checkbox and interact with it, or a radio button, all right? So there's many robust and smarter ways to go about doing this type of stuff without having to code out, or rather develop a locator for each and every element that you want to interact with. Because over time, as the application changes, you need to maintain it. And it's going to be a lot of work to maintain. And you want to have something that's has as little maintenance, or little maintenance to no maintenance if possible, but no maintenance is highly unlikely, so the less maintenance, the better. And this is the same type of method, right? So we're getting elements with a certain text, all right? Same thing, just passing in that text value that we contain, that we're looking for, and this is or, right? So it can contain this, or it can contain this, right? And the way this is set up is we're using the same text the same way, but we're looking for what? Different attribute, right? So in this case, this has a value of whatever that text is. And in this case, we're looking for anything that contains this specific text, right? So we're using this text function, this text method, and looking for text. And here, if this does not find anything, then we can try this. And this is going to be, we're looking for anything that has a value attribute that contains this text. So this might be a little bit foreign to you guys. That's fine. Don't worry about it, right? I just want to give you a little insight into why or when you would want multiple elements returned to you, right? The way this works is we need one specific element. Then you can go ahead and create something more robust and get a collection or a list of elements returned to you and search through that and do different things, all right? When you take that kind of approach, you have something that's just much more flexible over time, as opposed to something that's very rigid and is going to be prone to errors or failures over time. So I know that was a lot said. At least this first part, when it came to CSS selectors, should be familiar to you guys. XPaths, I'm sure, is new, and this this little code snippet over here is new. Do you have questions around this?
Yes, could we get this presentation?
Yeah, I got you guys.
Thanks.
So, excuse me. So whenever you're talking about collection of the different elements, then after you get it returned to you, you can perform action to each element in that collection, right?
Exactly, right. And that's going to require coding. So whether it's C# or Python, you need to code at that point.
Okay.
And telling you, like, one of the things that you'll see if you go into a workplace that has some automation is, I'm sure your curiosity and your motivation is going to cause you to start checking out the automation framework a little bit and see how it was developed. Keep what I'm saying in mind and see the patterns that they have in their automation framework, and see what they're doing and how much maintenance this stuff is going to cause. Ask questions, be inquisitive, because I've been through several different companies at this point, and I've seen this develop many different ways, and this is by far the most robust and error-proof way of developing something, as opposed to using those one-off hard-coded locators.
So whenever you're talking about framework, it's basically, you're talking about a set of, you're talking about logic that's set behind all those statements that we write, right? That when we write scenario, when, and then, actually behind those texts, there is a code, right? And that's what referred as a framework, right?
Exactly, right? Because somehow something is opening that Chrome driver page. Somehow this report is being generated for us, right? Somehow all these different things are going on in the background, but we're blind to it. We don't know, and in this case, we don't care, right? Because we have the framework taking care of all of that. This is surface level that we're dealing with, and these are just the feature files that exist on top of the framework that allows us to do what we need to do. So a framework takes care of just all of those implementation details that you don't want to deal with. It takes care of all that for you. And when we're talking about, again, real world scenarios, you're going to be having multiple development environments that you're working within, there's going to be firewalls and proxies, and you need to submit this report, or you need to submit those results into a database so you can have a report saved, or you need database access, right, to get user information, to validate that an email doesn't exist. And all of that is going to be taken care of by the framework.
Okay, and the people who develop those frameworks, who are they?
STETs.
Okay.
STETs, senior automation engineers, but STETs are mostly taking care of those low-level implementation details. And it takes a while to develop that. Like, it'll take easily 3 to 6 months, depending the complexity that's involved with it.
And usually it's unique to each application, right?
Yeah, because, well, yes, usually it is unique to each application because each application has its own nuances, but certain principles should be followed throughout all.
And so what language, like I assume it's a, it's a program, right? You have to write the code and what language is usually used for framework?
Just depends on the company. You could do it in C#, you could do it in Python, you could do it in Java.
It doesn't, okay.
It's not that it doesn't matter, it's specific to the company, right? You're not going to develop an application in a language that nobody at the company supports or develops in, right?
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Robert, can I ask you a question? Actually, several questions. First question, Cucumber, it is just only for, no, it is not just for native application, it is just for web application, right?
Web application, yes.
Yes, and I can use it. Can you show the place if it is, I can change, just in our example, we were using Google Chrome, but I can actually use, and for example, Firefox Mozilla.
Yes, you can.
And do you know where to change it?
Right here. So within this config file, you change this.
And about, I saw I was in New York right now, and I saw that they were changing an environment. So, for example, I can change staging environment or development environment, QA environment. So I can change it, and it's inside of this program.
So the way this is set up, right, is this isn't taking into account multiple environments. We just have a base URL that we're using.
But I can change it.
You can, exactly, right? So here you can just change it, right? You could change this to whatever, the production, development, local, whatever other environment you want.
Yes, it's very good because, for example, I have created test automation, and I just need to change environment, and it's actually they will do it for different environments.
So yes, right? You can update this base URL for the environment you want to test in. The thing is, though, that's not the best way to go about it, because different environments are going to behave differently. Say in your test environment, we don't have email confirmation, or we don't have CAPTCHA, right? Those types of things that exist in production do not exist in test. Or the database that we're retrieving information from is different from the database that we're going to use in dev versus production, right? And so this is all logic that needs to be coded within the framework. So when you execute tests, it can handle it accordingly. So if you're just updating a base URL, you still will run into problems, especially as you start developing more and more feature files in one environment and try to test it in another environment. And then you'll need to maintain variations of that feature file in order to execute them in every environment, right? And then it starts becoming very unmaintainable. And so that's how come the work that's done early on with the development of the framework is crucial in order to have a automation solution that is gonna last and not break very easily.
So that means that for every environment, I have to create different automation test cases?
No, that's not what we want, right? That's bad. That means we have duplicates or triples of the same thing, right? Small variations, that's no good. So that's how come again, right? So there's going to be more logic, more coding that's done that's going to handle everything. So basically, based off of the URL that's provided in here, there's going to be other logic that is executed that will determine, oh, okay, this is the database I should call because I can see that it's a development environment. Or no, this is the database I should call because this URL matches the production environment, right? And so that's the kind of logic that needs to be included or incorporated into your automation solution.
Okay, thank you for explanation. What kind of application, what kind of tools do you use for automation of native applications?
That's a good question. That you'll be using like, what is it? For iOS devices, if you're talking, like we're talking about native mobile?
Yes, native mobile applications.
So native mobile, you're going to be using like XC test, which is for iOS, and for Android, you have, what is it?
Opium.
Android Jetpack or something like that for native mobile automation for Android devices. Personally, I personally have not developed frameworks around those native applications. There's another variation of Selenium called Appium. And Appium is also used for mobile testing and very powerful, but it does have some limitations. So that's how come it's important to understand all the tools that are out there and the differences between each.
Opium, it is just only for Android.
I'm sorry?
Opium, it is just only for Android.
No, it's for Android and iOS, and if Windows devices were around, Windows devices at one point too.
That's a good news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One more question, Robert, that's off topic a little bit about the environments. Like we have development environment, we have test environment, staging, production. So basically the only difference is the functionality that is available, right, on those applications. Like for example, there will be some cut databases used for certain environments, right? Not all the functionality will be available on on certain test environments. Like for example, if the company has, why would company want to have several test environments? Like that's the question that I kind of have.
Sure. So first off, when production will never match test, well, except for maybe like the small window after release, right? Because in production, we're going to have all the tested, tried and true code, but after we do that release and everything's good, we're already developing new functionality, right? So that new functionality is going to exist in test that does not exist in production. And why would we want to have multiple test environments? In order to speed up testing and isolate changes. So say I am working on a redesign of the whole homepage, right? I'm redesigning the whole homepage and changing the sign-up process. That is something that might take some time to do and will also impact all the existing automation that we have in place. Now, while we're doing that development, we are still adding new functionality, right? Because for one of the stories, we're just changing the look and feel, the UI. And then other stories, we're still adding functionality or we're fixing bugs, right? So it allows me to push those changes to an isolated environment that do not contain all the other changes that we're trying to release at the end of the sprint. And it allows me to also refactor or update my existing automation to anticipate those changes to come that reside in test 1, but that does not reside in test 2 or test 3, but those other changes, such as the new functionality or those bugs that were resolved, do reside in test 2 and test 3. So it allows me to work, to have more branches being developed on independently and push those environments or push those changes to isolated environments for testing purposes. So if we don't finish all the changes for, say, that UI redesign, we don't have to worry about that code and the other code all existing within one environment. Because then when it comes to the end of the sprint, we want to release something, right? And if I don't have all those changes done, now I need to separate all those UI changes from all those functional changes in order to get that release out to production. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Ultimately, just to simplify it a little bit more, right? We have multiple test environments, so we can test specific changes in each environment. So we can push one thing out at a time if need be, or once we validate that one thing works and another thing works, then we can merge those into one environment.
Oh, okay. And that would be like separate environment before the production, right?
Yes.
Okay. So who is responsible for setting up those environments, and who is responsible for pushing the whole process?
Yeah, DevOps is usually taking care of like those environments. You're going to have some support teams taking care of all of that, dealing with infrastructure. You're not going to be dealing with that. The only time you start dealing with that is like at the SDET level. Mm-hmm. And even then you're still not dealing with like spinning up environments, but you're dealing with configuration for different environments.
And DevOps, those people who actually work with Jenkins as well, with continuous integration, right? And continuous deployment, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Exactly, right. So those DevOps people are the ones who are using those orchestration tools, such as like Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, and some others.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Robert, sorry, can I ask you a question? What kind of tool do you use for testing API? Because I talking with the other. Postman? No, I know, but I was talking with the other guy, and they said that they have some kind of different tools, but unfortunately, I don't remember it. But it
Fiddler?
wasn't a Postman. Yes, maybe it, but when I said Postman, some of them they don't even know that there is some kind of like it is called a collection. They said, "Oh, we don't know it," and we use a different tool.
That's
So,
fine. Don't stress that. Like, not everybody knows every tool. Postman's a very popular tool. It's a very mainstream tool. So I'm a little
yeah,
surprised that they don't know it.
yeah, I explained it. Yeah, to
Yeah,
them.
Postman's one. Fiddler's another one. What's another one? What's it called? It's the tip of my tongue. I want to, not Blaze Meter, because Blaze Meter is the paid version.
JMeter, but I thought
JMeter, thank you.
Jamie.
So,
it's mostly like for performance testing, no?
so just what I was going to say, right? So JMeter is primarily using JMeter on, you can use JMeter to do some API testing.
Or Swagger, maybe Swagger.
Swagger's another one. Thank you. Perfect. But yeah, you can use JMeter to do API testing. However, it's primarily, the tool is primarily for performance testing, right? As you pointed out. So when we want to go ahead and mimic load on a website, we want to mimic, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 users hitting our website concurrently. JMeter is good for that. But JMeter is, you still need the hardware in order to simulate all of those users, right? And so then there's like a paid service called BlazeMeter, and they can provide you all of the hardware you need on the fly and blah, blah, blah. I'm going out of scope now. But yeah, those are other tools that you can use for API testing.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I want to ask one more question, Robert. So since we touched JMeter a little bit, I know that performance testing is not part of our course, but in the real world, like is there like a separation between like just regular manual testing and performance testers, or
Yeah.
there is actually dedicated people who actually do performance testing, right?
Performance test is kind of a niche of QA, or a subset of QA. Like, there is a lot of complexity that's involved when it comes to doing performance testing. And you do need to understand how to utilize some scripting languages. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Thinking YAML, but I know it's not YAML. There's a specific scripting language, Taurus. Taurus is one, and then there's another scripting language. And these scripting languages are used to mimic those user behaviors, because it's one thing to put all that load on the application to simulate, 100,000 users. But real world scenario, you're not just going to have 100,000 users come to your website, do nothing and leave, right? They're going to do things. They're going to interact with things. There's going to be delays between one click and another because they're reading something. They get a text message, they do whatever, right? And so you need to be able to write these scripts that simulate all those different behaviors. And then you're going to have users that come from all different places in the country or all different places in the world, right? And so you need to go ahead and distribute the load coming from all different places, servers that are distributed and all this stuff. So in short, yes, performance testers are a niche or a subset of QA testing.
And it's kind of similar, I guess, with security testing.
Yes. Right. So when we talk about QA, right, it's high level, right? And then QA can be broken down. And so of course we have our manual testers. We can have API testers exclusively. We have security testers. We have performance testers. We have automation engineers, right? We have people that just specialize in mobile automation. There is, of course, native desktop application, which that's not really common anymore because everything's transitioning to web applications. But there's all these different specialties when it comes to QA.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, so that's all I have for you today. I will share these slides with you. Just give me a little bit, and I'll put it out there for you guys to check out. I will share our feature file that we have, and I'm gonna play around with this locator, see if I can come up with something. So you guys will have 2 unique locators. But aside from that, that's all I have. Have a good evening. I will see you all on Saturday. Oh, also, I have not seen any messages from you guys in the channel regarding suggestions of things you want to revisit, things you want to talk about. Remember, this is our last formal session. So after today, we're still having our classes, of course, but there's going to be more free form, whatever you guys bring up. On Saturday, we'll have the presenter go over some interview stuff. Interview tips and tricks and resume type stuff. So we'll be spending more time on that whole process because we want to make sure you guys are out there on the market actively, not just sitting around and spending more time on this type of stuff. So if you got anything, please put it in the channel so I can prepare something around it. But yeah, have a good evening, guys, and I'll see you Saturday.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Saturday, bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, guys.